Yeah, so I'm Lukas Kissell. I'm on the USA skeleton team. I'm one of the youngest on the team at the age of 18, and I got interested in the sport back when I was 8, back in the 2010 Olympics.
Okay.
And this is when the US won their first gold medal in bobsled in over 50 years. And I just got infatuated with the sport. I thought it was so cool. I learned everything about it, and eventually came to the time where I was like, I'd like to do that. Because for a while, I didn't think, oh, that's something I'll be able to do. Like a lot of people think, oh, I can't do that sport because there's only 2 tracks in the U.S. It's not like you have a track right down the road or a football
Right.
field around town. It's like you only have 2 in the nation. But so I was interested in it enough that I was like, I think I might want to pursue this. So I looked at how I wanted to try out and how I was going to try out. And back then we had an in-person combine, and you had to be at least 13 to try out. I was 16. I was like, might as well go for it.
Cool.
But the problem was the closest one was in Johnson City, Tennessee. I'm from around Pittsburgh, PA. That's a 7 to 8 hour drive. So
Right.
I was thinking about, well, if I want to even go down and try out, I better put the commitment in. So I worked my butt off for a year doing everything that combine asked, training to perfect that combine. And although I went down to Johnson City, had a blast, I didn't qualify, didn't hit the 500-point mark, but I did get the second highest combine score for anyone under the age of 18. And that motivated me to try out again the next year. Now, that was last summer, 2019. And same thing, worked my butt off, perfected everything. And I went up to Lake Placid. And I went up, and again, I thought I didn't qualify. I didn't hit the 500-point mark. But I did get the shot put, which boosted me up to a 440-point mark. And that year, they decided, hey, let's change things up. For anyone under the age of 21, if you can hit a score over 400, we'd like to see you come out and try out for the team. And
Okay.
so I qualified without even knowing. And so that made my day whenever I found that out. And so time went by. I didn't hear back from them yet, but that was because of some contingencies with they never worked with youth. Like I was still under 18 at that time, and they never worked with youth. So there was kind of confusion on how to contact me. And so eventually I got contacted, and we planned out coming out to the season, and I began to slide. And every time I had a blast with it because this is something I've loved forever.
Right.
And so first thing, I went up to Lake Placid, missed a few days of school, 3 days of school, and I got introduced to skeleton. I was like, oh, this is cool, this is fun. And a lot of people, it's not for everyone because it's a big adrenaline sport. It's not as big as a risk as people think, but it can be scary. And so there's people that drop out because they're a little bit of like they're not set good for that kind of fast-paced environment. Because there's a lot of like nerves that get involved in like football and track like before it, but the nerves kind of follow you through, and you need to learn to stay relaxed with that in skeleton because curves are coming at you at like 75, 60 miles per hour, up to 80 miles per hour sub tracks. And you just need to learn to keep your cool and like go with it and just enjoy it. And so I was a little nervous going to my first run. It was only start 3 at Lake Placid, and I was just a little nervous. Just it was something new. I didn't know how I was going to go, but I went down and I enjoyed it. So, and every day on average, I did more than 4 runs. And at Lake Placid, and at any track really, any more than 2 runs is a lot. And so one day I did 5. And it was a cold night. It was like, it went down to -6 that night. And I was thinking about taking a 6th run. And well, I was hurting at that time because the hits that you take in skeleton, that's what keeps you from continuing to go run after run after run.
Right. Right.
And so I was about to go for a 6th run, but that night that was like where I was like, this is something I want to do. When I noticed I was doing it that much, and like, because I didn't know what to expect going up to Lake Placid. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I just knew I loved these sports and I wanted to try them. And as you saw, I did everything in my power to get to try them. But even after you do that, you're never sure if you really will like it unless you do it. And so I did it. I found out that I loved it, and I was happy to continue it. So then I was asked to come out to Park City to try the track and try out Western Regionals. And there was the first time. So there's 2 types of tracks. Lake Placid is what we call a driver track because you need to use a lot of subtle movements to guide your way through the curves in a way to get the fastest time. Park City is a track called a glider track, whereas you're more or less going to go through and you want to stay calm and you kind of want to be more relaxed. You want to be relaxed at every track, but at Park City, you're not going to be doing as large of those turns and large as those movements that change the direction of the sled. And so it's cool to see that different kind of style of sliding. And there at Park City was the first time I got to actually push the sled into the track and actually start running. And we did a little competition in the Western Regionals, and that was fun to try out. And it's just cool because I've gotten to meet all these people, and it's just like they really immerse you in the sport. It's a really loving community. And that's one thing I've always loved about sport. And I was afraid going into it first, like, man, professional sports and like these big, like high competition sports. I was like, I don't know what the atmosphere is like. It's not like your high school team where you're like, everybody's there cheering you on. Like, right. I'm worried that, like, I was worried going in, like, man, everybody's out for you. Like, you got to watch out for yourself. But that's not how it is, especially at least in my sport. Everybody's there supporting you, telling you like what you did wrong, what you did right. Like, it's a great environment. And that's what really helped push me to continue going to it. And so with skeleton, it's just that kind of fun atmosphere that that's what keeps me going. And it was something different. Like this year, I was lucky enough to get 2 training sessions in. That was good. Like some people go through the whole season, like just doing skeleton. And me being in high school, I was my high school senior year that time. I didn't have the time to do that. So I had to continue high school, finish that up. And so I got 2 training sessions, and that was enough to make me fall in love in the sport. And so then I started figuring out how I'm going to do it through college. I mean, because it's not a collegiate sport and colleges don't sponsor it. But it's the end of the season ended pretty sadly for a lot of people. A lot of people were coming up to Lake Placid for nationals for skeleton. And then a lot of people actually flew up, were at Lake Placid, and then they had to be told to go back home because that was when everything got shut down for COVID.
Right.
I luckily didn't fly up at that point, so I didn't have to come back home. But it was just a sad thing to see how everybody's season just get cut short like that. Right. We were lucky enough to have a lot of people have like a full season. Like they just didn't have their season cut short. Because like in high school, I didn't get my senior track season, my senior outdoor track season. And there was a little bit of like being upset there for a moment. And then like you just need to you had to understand that that's what you loved. And if you really wanted to, like, I'm thinking about continuing in college. And it's just really, COVID, what happened with that really just showed, like, it perfected my love of sport. It just showed me what I loved, because you really don't know what you really love. Like everybody says, like, you take for granted what you have until you don't. Like, I didn't understand until, like, what I loved until it was gone. So that really showed me what I enjoyed. And that kind of pushed me to, like, pursue track a little bit more. I didn't get to do it too much over the summer, but it really just showed me, like, I worked a lot to perfect everything that I didn't have to do in track. So, like, over the summer of COVID, I just worked my butt off, as I have been, and just perfecting things with all this extra time I've had.
When you were there and you said, okay, they said, well, try skeleton. Now, are you thinking, I'm a bobsledder? That's what I'm thinking about being, right?
That was kind of like the initial thought. Like going in, I was like, I'd like to try both, but mainly bobsled was kind of on my mind. But when I first started trying out, I was like, I might not be able to do this because I didn't see the guy. I've never seen a real bobsledder in life until I went down to Johnson City. And when I saw the guys who were doing bobsled, they were much larger than me. And I was like, okay, I don't think I fit that niche too well. But they're like, hey, there's something out there for you, skeleton, for you lighter guys. So like, sure, I'll try that out. And so they put me on a sled, and I was like, sure, let's try it out.
Now, when you're thinking of that thought, you're thinking, okay, there's luge and there's skeleton. Which one is, okay, this one's crazy, but this one's sane?
So I remember watching back in the 2010 Olympics, there was this major luge crash. And actually, it was so weird because that was a tragic moment. And it was a sad thing to see this guy, but that was luge. And I was like, that's something I never want to do. But then I saw bobsled, and I was like, that's something I want to try. But as you can see, I was really interested in the sliding sports back at the 2010 Olympics.
Right.
And but there was also skeleton, and I thought it was the same thing as luge at the time. But then, like, I started looking into the sports, and I learned more about them. And I was like, that might be something I want to try. So when I first tried out for the sports, I was like, I'd like to try both. But as I said, my physique didn't really allow me to be so suitable for
Right.
bobsled. But yeah, I was like, luge is the crazy one, and skeleton's kind of okay. And so that's kind of how I got here, I guess. But I always thought bobsled was the safest option and more like something I would be interested in. But actually, when you compare skeleton and bobsled, bobsled is usually considered the rougher one because I like this analogy that I heard. It's basically like being thrown in a trash can and thrown down a hill.
Right.
Bobsled.
I've heard that one before.
Because
Right.
you're kept, and it's very small on a bobsled, especially when you're those big guys. And so you'll come off these curves, and it basically feels like you're dropped down onto like the straightaway. And so when you're like that, and when you have no idea where you're at, you're gonna drop in, and you're gonna feel like you're gonna be shaking around. Whereas skeleton, I liked the way Lake Quazza said it when I was up at Lake Placid. She was there trying it out for the first time, but she's been on the bobsled team for a long time. She's a bobsled pilot, but she wanted to try skeleton. And I thought, this is so funny. She said, it's so peaceful. And I was like, that's anything but peaceful. But I want to try bobsled. So, but yeah, that was the cool, like, it was something neat to see, like, the different, like, views of the sport, especially, like, those who've been in the sport for a long time and that, like, me just beginning.
Well, so when you get to the point you're saying, now I'm sliding, and you mentioned earlier you have different kinds of tracks, different kinds of techniques, all of that. Now you're not just along for the ride. Now you are a competitor.
Yeah.
What's that mindset?
So, especially when you're coming into the sport, you can't think like anything. You can't just come into something and think you're the best at it.
Right.
And for a while, I thought I was coming in. I thought like I was going to come in and really excel at it. But then I like started to look into like it's such a good opportunity to be new at something. Like a lot of people think I just want to be the best at something when I come into it.
Right.
But a lot of times you overlook the fact that it's a great thing to be new at the sport because you're allowed to make those mistakes. You're allowed to learn, and that's what you want to do. Like me being new, I want to learn. Like I'm not perfect at this, so I can compete. It's so fun to compete, and that's what I look into it. Like it's the fun aspect of competing, but you don't want to get over your head. You don't want to be like, okay, I'm going to go to Altenburg, like Germany, the hardest track in the world, and like I want to go start off at the top of Lake Placid on my first run. Don't want to do those things because like you don't know how to interact with those. You don't know like there's a lot of things that can happen that you're still not familiar with. And so at Park City, I took advantage of that, but I don't want to make too many mistakes because you don't want to be reckless. Right. But I took advantage of that mindset. Like, feel free to don't get upset if you make mistakes because you're new, but try your best to do your best. And so that put me into like a mindset of like just looking at it like fun, and that way I excelled at it. So at Park City, I was so excited because throughout the week, I improved my down time from the start to the end of the week by like 2 seconds, and that's like huge. Now, of course, my downtime at the end, like 55:04, it's not a great downtime for Park City. It's like 3 seconds slower, or even like some go 50 seconds, 5 seconds slower than the fastest runs. But like, as I said, I'm new. I mean, that's like the fun of it. But like, that's the cool part. Like, you even look at these Olympians, like Usain Bolt, Noah Lyles, Christian Coleman, all these guys, and you look at them and you're like, man, I want to be like them. And you want to see like all these people like at the top of their game. But you have to understand, they weren't always there.
Right.
They went through the same process you're going. And like, if you think about it, like it's like in some way a tradition. Like it's somewhat like a legacy. Like we all go through that process. And that's kind of like, if you can think of it like that, it makes it much more enjoyable.
Well, it's something you mentioned earlier about the camaraderie and all of that. I've noticed in individual team sports, so to speak, that you're not necessarily competing against someone else, even though you are. You're competing against yourself, against the track, and I love when they show, here are the splits, here's how this works. Yeah. And you're like, I'm not worried about what anyone else has done, because if I worry about that, I rush up against the side of the wall and I'm done. So I've got to stay in the moment. And people are cheering for you individually because they want you to do your best. Now, if your best beats them, oh well, but they're not really working against you. They're working against the track as well. So you have a common enemy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, like the tracks are always like, and it's always like a fun experience because like, it's like where you kind of mix sports. Like it's a racing sport in the way, like, you could think like NASCAR. Like, we have the splits, we have the different tracks. Like, we got to learn the tracks, we got to learn the techniques to the tracks. But like, then there's like that technique for the start. And a lot of times the start's going to be very similar, but a lot of times it's going to be different because some starts are like a lot steeper and they'll allow you to get into like the track faster. And some starts aren't as like, what's the word I'm looking for? As like nice to get into the track. Like, they'll put you into a position that's not as favorable as other starts. And so it's just like learning all those different things. Like, it's like you use the technical aspect, you learn the technical aspect. And I like how you used it as like, that's our common enemy. And so it's just more or less, it's a mix of, you don't want to fight it as much, but also like get to know it. And so your main thing you're really fighting is air resistance. That's like your main enemy. But yeah, I really like that analogy that you made. That's like, it kind of puts it into perspective. Like, that's how all athletes should be. It's like, we're all against a common enemy, but it's like, we're all just striving to be our best.
And the thing of it is that you're all trying to get to that same goal, but it really doesn't matter because you're fighting that same thing. So if you aren't the guy that can run that time, it's nice to see that someone else can.
Yeah. And so like, that's like even like the same idea, like the first Olympic skeleton was ever introduced, the 2002 Winter Olympics. That was a big motto there. It's not so much winning as much as taking part. And that's a lot of things that we also like exemplify, as I noticed going to like the training sessions and stuff. It's taking part. Like, you want to strive to be your best self. You want to strive to be the best at your event. But you can't get upset when you make these mistakes. It's all part of the learning process. It's all about striving to be better. And even with that, like, having that passion and that joy for what you do, it just makes it so much better.
Now, looking ahead, and I know that we don't do that in athletics, but looking ahead, now we have the 2022 games. What are you thinking as far as now you set up the training regimen, what you have to do, where you have to go, where you have to train again? Like, it's only 2 tracks here, but now are you looking at the European season? Are you looking at all that? Or are you just thinking, okay, I can focus here and move along?
Yeah, so currently I'm still kind of in that mindset. I want to work with the North American tracks, and then like hopefully maybe I can span out and kind of get new tracks under my belt. Like, I've tried learning Whistler, I tried learning Park City, and I've tried learning Lake Placid. I haven't been to Whistler yet, and so like that'd be nice to get under my belt before I try moving elsewhere. And even like the turnover time for like people that get to like the elite level, it's much longer for skeleton because we're our own push athletes and pilots.
Right.
Like, you can sometimes in bobsled, like, you can be a really good push athlete and get on a national team in a few months, a year. But as pilots and like people that need to drive the sled, we need to learn those subtle techniques. We need to learn those subtleties that are on each track. And that takes a while. So right now, I think the 2022 Olympics are a little bit out of my reach. But I think maybe if I work hard enough, I can make it to 2026. And I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Great. Now, the one question I always have for someone looking at the Olympics is, now the event is great, but the pageantry and the village and the preset, all that, that's something that the people I've talked to, like, you're not really focused on that until you get there.
Yeah.
And then that's what says, I'm in the Olympics. And I think that's really cool, because I don't think you get that just at a normal event. It's like, okay, they introduce you, blah, blah, blah. Here you are. Here's a crowd. Here's the fans. Go. But now you've got the whole ceremony and the lighting of the torch and all that. To me, that's what I've heard, is that is really a really cool thing. So I hope you get to experience that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it looks. I'm sorry that we had the technical issues. We'll make things work out some kind of way. I'll cut and splice and all kinds of stuff. If you would do me a favor, though, tell people how they can find you and help you with your endeavors, with whether it be Twitter, Facebook, or anything like that.
Well, if you want to see like what I do, I mostly use Instagram as my main platform to show what I do. You can find me at Lukas1214, LUKISS1214. And just keep up. I don't post too often, but like usually when I'm at a training session or so, you'll see I'll post a lot during then. But yeah, if you want to keep up with me, that's where you can see it. Currently, I don't have too much of a system to support me at the moment, but maybe we can get that finalized maybe later when I'm more deep into the sport.
Okay. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time, and good luck to you, and we'll chronicle your journey as we go.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
No problem at all.